The medical relief camp sprawled across the rocky plateau of Nova Mira like a beacon of hope against the planet's harsh crimson landscape. Specialized mobile shelters in soft grays and blues stood in precise geometric patterns, each one a testament to human engineering and compassionate design. Multispecies patients recovered inside, their various physiological needs carefully accommodated by an intricate network of advanced medical technology. Dr. Elena Rodriguez moved between patient zones with the practiced efficiency of a veteran field medic. Her neural-linked diagnostic tablet continuously scanned and processed the complex medical data of each patient, translating alien biochemistries and tracking recovery progress across multiple species. The relief mission represented humanity's most ambitious humanitarian effort in the outer colonial regions, a collaborative project involving 17 different interstellar organizations. Nearby, a group of xenobiological specialists worked on treating a critically wounded Krell-Theri diplomat. The insectoid species had unique cellular regeneration requirements that demanded constant monitoring and precise environmental controls. Specialized nanofiltration systems hummed softly, maintaining the exact atmospheric conditions needed for the diplomat's recovery. The first warning came as a subtle disruption in the camp's quantum communication network. A microsecond of static, barely perceptible to human senses, but immediately apparent to the advanced monitoring systems. Dr. Rodriguez's diagnostic tablet flickered, its holographic display momentarily distorting before stabilizing. "Something's wrong," she muttered to her senior medical assistant, a cybernetically enhanced nurse named Marcus Chen. Before Marcus could respond, the first energy weapon discharge sliced through the nearest medical shelter. The precision was clinical, almost mathematical. A targeted strike designed to cause maximum disruption with minimal warning. The shelter's advanced force field flickered and collapsed, exposing the vulnerable patients inside. Chaos erupted with surgical precision. The Zelnary assault teams moved with a coldly calculated efficiency that demonstrated their complete disregard for medical neutrality. Each energy discharge was strategically placed to maximize casualties and minimize the possibility of effective counter-response. Dr. Rodriguez's trauma response implant kicked into overdrive. Embedded deep in her cervical vertebrae, the advanced neural network began processing potential survival scenarios faster than human consciousness could comprehend. Emergency protocols activated across the camp. Automated systems designed to protect the most vulnerable patients, to preserve medical data, to create escape routes. But the Zelnary had planned meticulously. Communication jamming fields went up simultaneously, cutting off any potential distress signals. The attackers moved with a precision that suggested they had studied every possible defensive scenario the medical team might employ. Wounded patients who moments ago were recovering now found themselves in a sudden war zone. The Krell-Theri diplomat, still connected to life support systems, became an immediate target. Marcus Chen moved with superhuman speed, beginning emergency extraction protocols while simultaneously trying to protect the most critical patients. Dr. Rodriguez realized with chilling clarity that this was no random attack. The Zelnary had specifically targeted the medical mission, a deliberate violation of every known interstellar humanitarian protocol. Their goal wasn't just destruction, but a psychological message. No one was safe, no boundaries would be respected. The camp's defensive systems, designed primarily for medical support rather than combat, struggled to respond. Automated medical drones attempted to create protective barriers, using their bodies as shields for the most vulnerable patients. Specialized medical equipment became improvised defensive tools, force field generators, diagnostic lasers, and nano-repair systems repurposed in desperate attempts to protect life. In less than 7 minutes, what had been a carefully maintained medical relief center became a landscape of destruction. Bodies of medical personnel and patients lay among shattered medical equipment and collapsed shelters. The precise, calculated nature of the attack spoke to something far more sinister than typical military aggression. Dr. Rodriguez survived by a combination of advanced neural implants, years of field training, and an almost impossible sequence of fortunate micro-decisions. Her trauma response system recorded every moment, not just as a survival mechanism, but as potential evidence. Every microsecond of the attack was being processed, analyzed, transmitted through hidden backup channels. The Zelnari had attacked a medical mission. They had believed this would break humanity's spirit. They were wrong. This was only the beginning. The United Earth Defense and Humanitarian Response Center looked nothing like a traditional military facility. Located deep beneath the Antarctic Research Complex, its primary architecture seemed more like an advanced research university than a strategic command center. Soft lighting, organic geometric designs, and adaptive environmental systems created an atmosphere of calm precision. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's mission report arrived through quantum-encrypted channels, its data packets reconstructing a horrific narrative that sent shockwaves through the highest levels of human leadership. The recorded attack wasn't just a military incident. It was a fundamental violation of every known interstellar humanitarian principle. Dr. Marcus Chen, now serving as the lead strategic analyst, stood before a holographic display that reconstructed the Nova Mira massacre in excruciating detail. Quantum data processors picked apart every microsecond of the attack, revealing patterns that went far beyond typical military strategy. This wasn't just an attack, he explained to the assembled team of specialists. This was a calculated attempt to break our commitment to humanitarian principles. The response team represented an unprecedented collaboration. Quantum bioengineers worked alongside veteran field medics, psychological warfare experts, cybernetic specialists, and xenobiological researchers. They weren't designing a weapon of destruction, but a comprehensive system of protection and response. Dr. Sandra Wei, a leading expert in adaptive neural networks, began mapping out the core concept. We're not creating soldiers, she explained, her holographic presentation showing complex neural pathway simulations. We're developing guardians, individuals who can understand and respond to complex humanitarian scenarios with unprecedented precision. The project quickly received a classified designation, Protocol Sanctuary. Its core premise was revolutionary: transform medical knowledge into the most advanced defensive capability imaginable. Traditional military thinking focused on destruction. Their approach would focus on protection, understanding, and adaptive response. Cybernetic integration became the first major breakthrough. The team developed neural implants that could simultaneously process medical data, tactical information, and complex emotional intelligence scenarios. These weren't simple combat enhancements, but comprehensive adaptive systems that could make split-second decisions balancing protection, medical intervention, and conflict resolution. Xenobiological research provided crucial insights. By studying how different species responded to trauma, stress, and conflict, the team developed a comprehensive understanding of protection that went far beyond human-centric thinking. They weren't just preparing for one type of conflict, but creating an adaptive system that could respond to virtually any scenario. Psychological warfare specialists contributed perhaps the most unexpected element. They understood that true protection wasn't about overwhelming force, but about understanding, predicting, and neutralizing potential threats before they could fully manifest. Dr. Wei's neural network simulations became the backbone of the project. Each potential guardian would be equipped with a comprehensive understanding of medical intervention, conflict resolution, and adaptive response. They would be more than soldiers. They would be living embodiments of protection. The first prototype units began taking shape in specialized training facilities that looked more like advanced medical research centers than military bases. Candidates underwent rigorous selection processes that tested not just physical and mental capabilities, but emotional intelligence, medical knowledge, and adaptive thinking. We're creating something the galaxy has never seen before, Dr. Chen explained during a classified briefing. Defenders who understand that true strength isn't about destruction, but about the capacity to protect and heal. Quantum communication specialists developed entirely new communication protocols. Traditional military communication relied on linear, predictable systems. Their new approach would be dynamic, adaptive, capable of processing and responding to complex scenarios in milliseconds. The Zelneri had attacked a medical mission, believing they could break humanity's commitment to humanitarian principles. Instead, they had triggered a fundamental reimagining of what protection could mean. By the project's sixth month, the first prototype units began their initial training. They weren't soldiers in any traditional sense. They were guardians, living systems of protection, healing, and adaptive response. Something unprecedented was emerging. Not a weapon of war, but a comprehensive system of protection that would challenge everything the galaxy understood about conflict and humanitarian intervention. The galaxy would never be the same. The training facility rose from the rocky terrain of Europa's research complex like a living organism of glass, adaptive metamaterials, and precision engineering. Here, the first generation of Guardians would be forged, not through traditional military conditioning, but through a radical approach that merged medical science, psychological resilience, and adaptive warfare concepts. Lieutenant Elena Rodriguez stood before the initial cohort of 30 candidates. Unlike traditional military recruits, these individuals represented a diverse array of backgrounds. Emergency room surgeons, cynobiological researchers, trauma counselors, and veteran field medics. Their neural profiles had been meticulously analyzed, their emotional intelligence mapped with unprecedented precision. Protection is not about destruction. Rodriguez began her first lecture, her neural-linked presentation shifting through holographic displays of complex medical and tactical scenarios. It's about understanding, adapting, and preserving life in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. The training pushed human capabilities to their absolute limits. Candidates underwent simultaneous medical and tactical training that would have been impossible just a decade earlier. Neural implants allowed them to process multiple streams of information: patient biochemistry, tactical environmental data, communication protocols, and emotional intelligence scenarios, all in real time. Dr. Marcus Chen oversaw the psychological integration protocols. Each Guardian would need to make split-second decisions that balanced medical intervention, tactical response, and complex humanitarian considerations. Traditional military training emphasized elimination of threats. Their approach focused on neutralization, protection, and comprehensive understanding. Xenobiological simulation chambers became the crucible of their training. Candidates learned to treat patients from dozens of different species simultaneously, understanding their unique physiological and psychological requirements. A medical intervention for a silicon-based life form would require entirely different approaches compared to carbon-based or energy-based entities. The neural network integration was perhaps the most revolutionary aspect. Each Guardian's cybernetic implants created a living, adaptive system that could instantaneously process and respond to the most complex scenarios. They weren't just enhanced soldiers, they were walking medical and tactical response units that could adapt to virtually any situation. Practical training scenarios pushed the boundaries of human understanding. In one exercise, candidates would be dropped into a simulated disaster zone with multiple wounded species, limited resources, and potential hostile environmental conditions. Success wasn't measured by combat effectiveness, but by the ability to protect, heal, and resolve conflicts with minimal additional harm. Dr. Sandra Wei's psychological warfare team developed communication protocols that went far beyond traditional military thinking. Guardians would be equipped to understand and potentially neutralize threats through complex communication strategies, psychological insight, and adaptive response mechanisms. The physical augmentations were subtle but profound. Nanomedical systems integrated directly into their physiological structure allowed for instant medical intervention. Adaptive camouflage systems could shift not just visual appearance, but biochemical signatures to provide maximum protection for vulnerable patients. By the third month of training, the first cohort had become something entirely new. They moved with a fluidity that defied traditional understanding of combat or medical response. A Guardian could transition from performing complex surgery to neutralizing a potential threat in milliseconds, all while maintaining a comprehensive understanding of the broader humanitarian context. "We are not weapons," Dr. Chen would remind them during psychological integration sessions. "We are guardians. Our primary purpose is protection of life, of understanding, of potential." The Zelneri had attacked a medical mission, believing they could break humanity's commitment to humanitarian principles. Instead, they had triggered the development of a completely new approach to conflict and protection. The final assessment would be the true test. Candidates would be evaluated not on their ability to destroy, but on their capacity to protect, heal, and resolve complex scenarios with minimal additional harm. Their neural networks would be pushed to their absolute limits, testing the boundaries of human adaptability and compassion. As the first training cycle approached its conclusion, something unprecedented was emerging. Not soldiers, not medical personnel, but living systems of protection that would challenge everything the galaxy understood about conflict, humanitarian intervention, and the nature of defense. The Guardians were ready, and the galaxy would soon discover what humanity truly meant by protection. The Communication Research Facility occupied a quantum-shielded complex nestled within the Martian orbital stations. Here, the most advanced minds in human strategic communication worked on something far more complex than traditional warfare, a comprehensive approach to interspecies communication that would redefine conflict resolution. Dr. Elena Rodriguez and her team of communication specialists had developed an entirely new framework of understanding. Traditional military communication relied on linear, predictable information transfer. Their approach would be dynamic, adaptive, capable of processing and responding to complex scenarios in milliseconds. The Zelneri communication model was fundamentally rigid, a hierarchical system based on absolute control and linear information processing. Human researchers discovered something profound. The alien species had no conceptual framework for adaptive communication. Their entire societal and military structure depended on predictable, controllable information streams. Holographic simulation chambers became the testing ground for revolutionary communication strategies. Teams developed adaptive communication protocols that could simultaneously communicate, analyze, and potentially neutralize threat scenarios without traditional confrontational approaches. Dr. Marcus Chen's psychological warfare unit took a radical approach. Instead of focusing on defeating the Zelneri militarily, they would target the fundamental weaknesses in the alien civilization's communication and social structures. Prototype communication systems were developed that could generate complex, multi-layered information packages. These weren't simple messages but living communication ecosystems that could adapt, transform, and respond in real time. A single communication burst could simultaneously provide medical information, tactical data, emotional context, and potential resolution scenarios. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sandra Wei discovered that by introducing subtle quantum uncertainty into communication signals, they could create information packets that were fundamentally unpredictable to the Zelneri computational systems. Imagine a message that could simultaneously mean multiple things, a communication that existed in a state of potential rather than fixed meaning. Traditional Zelneri communication systems would struggle to process such complexity, creating a fundamental cognitive disruption. Psychological simulation scenarios became increasingly sophisticated. Researchers developed communication strategies that could potentially neutralize conflict scenarios before they could fully manifest. They weren't just preparing for confrontation. They were developing methods to prevent it entirely. The Guardian units would be the primary carriers of these advanced communication protocols. Each individual became a living communication system, capable of processing and responding to the most complex interspecies scenarios imaginable. Training scenarios pushed the boundaries of communication theory. Candidates would be placed in simulated conflict zones, where their primary objective wasn't combat, but comprehensive conflict resolution. Success was measured by their ability to understand, communicate, and potentially neutralize threats through advanced communication strategies. Neural network simulations revealed the profound weakness in the Zelneri approach. Their entire societal and military structure depended on absolute predictability. The human communication model introduced something they could never comprehend: genuine uncertainty, adaptive potential, and complex emotional intelligence. The communication research went far beyond simple information transfer. They were developing a comprehensive approach to understanding that challenged everything the Zelneri believed about conflict, communication, and interspecies interaction. Quantum communication specialists developed signal transmission methods that could potentially bypass traditional communication barriers. A single communication burst could contain multiple layers of information: medical data, tactical insights, emotional context, and potential resolution scenarios, all wrapped in a quantum uncertainty package that would be impossible for traditional computational systems to fully decode. The Zelneri had believed that attacking a medical mission would break humanity's spirit. Instead, they had triggered the development of a communication approach that would fundamentally challenge their entire understanding of conflict and resolution. As the first advanced communication protocols were finalized, something unprecedented was emerging. Not a weapon of war, but a comprehensive system of understanding that could potentially transform how different species could interact, communicate, and resolve conflicts. The Guardians were ready. The communication systems were prepared, and the galaxy was about to discover a completely new approach to interaction. The first engagement occurred on the mineral-rich planet of Kepler 327, a contested world sitting at the strategic intersection of three galactic territories. Orbital scans showed a developing Zelneri assault formation, a classic military deployment designed to overwhelm and subjugate. Lieutenant Elena Rodriguez led the first Guardian unit deployment. They arrived not as a traditional military force, but as a complex living system of protection and intervention. Their dropship moved with a fluidity that defied conventional military approach, less an invasion and more a precisely coordinated medical and strategic response. Zelneri assault teams initially detected what appeared to be a standard humanitarian relief mission. Their tactical systems began processing predictable scenarios: neutralization, elimination, conquest. They had no framework for understanding what was about to happen. The Guardians moved across the terrain like living ecosystems. Each team member carried advanced medical systems that could instantaneously analyze and respond to multiple physiological scenarios. Their adaptive camouflage shifted not just visually, but at a biochemical level, making them virtually undetectable until the moment of intervention. Dr. Marcus Chen's communication protocols came into play first. As Zelneri assault teams approached civilian settlements, they encountered communication signals that defied their computational understanding. These weren't simple jamming frequencies or standard defensive communications. Each signal was a complex, adaptive package that simultaneously provided medical information, tactical data, and potential resolution scenarios. The first direct encounter happened in a small mining settlement. Zelneri troops expected to find vulnerable targets. Instead, they encountered Guardians who could transition between medical intervention and tactical response with impossible speed. A wounded civilian, a silicon-based life form with complex medical requirements, would be stabilized in moments. The same Guardian who performed the intricate medical procedure could then neutralize a potential threat without causing additional harm. Their approach wasn't about destruction, but about comprehensive protection. Zelneri combat systems began to experience fundamental failures. Their targeting algorithms, designed for linear conflict scenarios, couldn't process the Guardian's adaptive approach. A weapon system designed to eliminate threats would suddenly find its computational pathways disrupted by complex medical and communication signals. One Zelneri assault team found themselves completely neutralized without a single fatality. Advanced neural dampening fields, integrated into the Guardian's communication systems, temporarily shut down their combat capabilities, not through destruction, but through a comprehensive understanding of their physiological and psychological systems. Dr. Sandra Wei's psychological warfare strategies proved devastatingly effective. The Guardians didn't just neutralize threats, they provided immediate medical support, communication intervention, and potential paths to resolution. Zelneri troops found themselves in scenarios they had no computational framework to understand. Tactical simulations became living, dynamic scenarios. A Guardian could transition from performing complex xenosurgery to neutralizing a potential threat in milliseconds, all while maintaining a comprehensive understanding of the broader humanitarian context. Orbital observation teams watched in disbelief. This wasn't a military engagement in any traditional sense. It was a comprehensive system of protection that challenged everything understood about conflict and intervention. The Zelneri discovered something profound. Humanity had developed an approach to conflict that wasn't about destruction, but about understanding. Each Guardian was a living communication system, a medical intervention unit, and a potential path to resolution. By the engagement's conclusion, no Zelneri troops had been killed. Wounded were provided immediate medical support. Civilian populations were protected with unprecedented efficiency. The entire conflict was resolved without a single fatality on either side. Something unprecedented had occurred. The Guardians had transformed the very nature of conflict resolution. They weren't soldiers in any traditional sense. They were living systems of protection, healing, and adaptive response. The galaxy would soon understand that humanity had developed something far more powerful than a weapon. They had created a comprehensive approach to protection that would fundamentally challenge everything understood about conflict, communication, and interspecies interaction. The first engagement was complete, and it was only the beginning. The interstellar communication networks buzzed with unprecedented activity. News of the Kepler 327 intervention spread faster than any traditional information stream, carried by quantum communication channels that defied previous understanding of information transfer. Diplomatic stations across multiple star systems received comprehensive data packets that challenged everything known about military intervention and conflict resolution. The human Guardians had done something entirely unexpected. They had resolved a potential galactic conflict without a single casualty, while providing comprehensive medical and humanitarian support. Dr. Elena Rodriguez found herself at the center of a diplomatic storm unlike any in human history. Interstellar communication specialists worked around the clock, processing and sharing the unprecedented intervention data. Each communication burst contained layers of medical, tactical, and humanitarian information that left other species both confused and intrigued. The Galactic Diplomatic Consortium convened an emergency session. Representatives from over 47 different species gathered in a massive orbital conference complex, each struggling to comprehend the human approach. Traditional diplomatic channels relied on predictable negotiation strategies. The human intervention had introduced something entirely new, a comprehensive approach to conflict that prioritized protection and understanding over destruction. Dr. Marcus Chen presented the intervention data with clinical precision. Holographic displays showed the complete breakdown of the Guardian unit's approach, medical interventions, communication strategies, and conflict resolution techniques that seemed to defy traditional military and diplomatic understanding. Most shocking was the complete lack of casualties. The Zelneri assault teams had been neutralized not through violence, but through a complex system of communication, medical intervention, and adaptive response. Their combat systems had been temporarily disabled without physical damage. Their aggressive intentions redirected through sophisticated psychological and communication strategies. The Kreltheri diplomatic delegation showed particular interest. As a species that had long suffered under Zelneri aggression, they recognized something profound in the human approach. This wasn't just a military strategy. It was a fundamental reimagining of interspecies interaction. Dr. Sandra Wei's communication research became the focus of intense study. The Guardian units had introduced communication protocols that existed in a state of quantum uncertainty, messages that could simultaneously mean multiple things, adapting in real time to the most complex scenarios. Diplomatic analysts struggled to categorize the human intervention. Traditional classification systems, military action, peacekeeping mission, humanitarian intervention, all failed to capture the complexity of what had occurred. The Guardians had created an entirely new approach to conflict resolution. Interstellar media networks carried comprehensive analyses of the intervention. Visual records showed Guardian units moving with impossible fluidity, transitioning between medical support, communication intervention, and potential threat neutralization with breathtaking efficiency. The Zelneri found themselves in an unprecedented situation. Their entire military and communication strategy had been fundamentally challenged. The intervention had exposed the profound limitations of their rigid, control-based approach to conflict. Diplomatic simulation teams began studying the human approach with intense focus. How could a military intervention prioritize protection and understanding over destruction? How could communication become a more powerful tool than weapons? The Guardian units became the subject of intense academic and diplomatic study. Research facilities across multiple star systems began developing programs to understand the human approach. Medical schools, communication research centers, and diplomatic training facilities all sought to comprehend this new paradigm. Most profound was the psychological impact. The Guardians had demonstrated something revolutionary. That true strength wasn't about the capacity to destroy, but about the ability to protect, understand, and resolve conflicts with minimal additional harm. Interstellar communication networks continued to process the intervention data. Each analysis revealed new layers of complexity, medical interventions that went beyond traditional understanding, communication strategies that challenged fundamental assumptions about conflict resolution, an approach to protection that prioritized life and understanding. The Galactic Diplomatic Consortium struggled to process the implications. This wasn't just a new military strategy. It was a fundamental challenge to everything understood about interspecies interaction, conflict resolution, and the nature of protection. As diplomatic discussions continued, one thing became clear. Humanity had introduced something unprecedented. Not a weapon of war, but a comprehensive system of understanding that could potentially transform how different species could interact, communicate, and resolve conflicts. The Guardians had done more than neutralize a potential conflict. They had demonstrated a completely new approach to interspecies interaction. And the galaxy was about to change forever. The rehabilitation facility orbited a distant neutron star, its quantum-shielded complex a testament to human innovation in psychological and interspecies understanding. Here, captured Zelneri personnel would undergo a process that went far beyond traditional prisoner treatment. It was a comprehensive approach to understanding, communication, and potential transformation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez oversaw the initial psychological intervention protocols. The facility was unlike any detention center in galactic history. Instead of punishment or containment, the focus was on comprehensive understanding, communication, and potential reconciliation. Zelneri prisoners found themselves in an environment that challenged everything they understood about conflict, imprisonment, and interspecies interaction. Neural adaptive communication systems allowed for unprecedented levels of understanding. Each interaction was a complex dance of communication, psychological insight, and potential resolution. Dr. Marcus Chin's team had developed rehabilitation protocols that went beyond traditional psychological intervention. They understood that the Zelneri's aggressive approach was rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of interspecies communication and protection. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. A senior Zelneri military commander, initially resistant to any form of communication, began to show signs of profound psychological transformation. The rehabilitation protocols introduced concepts that were entirely alien to the Zelneri understanding of conflict and interaction. Holographic simulation chambers became critical to the intervention process. Zelneri participants would be placed in scenarios that challenged their fundamental understanding of protection, communication, and interspecies interaction. These weren't simple training exercises, but complex psychological interventions designed to expand their conceptual frameworks. Dr. Sandra Wei's communication research played a crucial role. The intervention protocols introduced communication strategies that existed in a state of quantum uncertainty, Messages that could simultaneously mean multiple things, adapting in real time to the most complex psychological scenarios. Captured Zelneri personnel discovered something profound. The human approach wasn't about punishment or subjugation. It was a comprehensive system of understanding that sought to address the root causes of conflict, rather than simply neutralizing immediate threats. Psychological analysis revealed the deep-seated trauma that had driven the Zelneri's aggressive expansion. Generations of fear, a complex history of survival in a harsh galactic environment, had created a civilization built on absolute control and predictability. The rehabilitation facility became a living laboratory of interspecies understanding. Guardian unit specialists worked alongside psychological intervention teams, creating a comprehensive approach that went beyond traditional conflict resolution. Zelneri participants were introduced to medical intervention scenarios that challenged their understanding of protection. They would be placed in simulations where they could experience the complex decision-making processes of the Guardian units, scenarios that prioritized life, understanding, and potential resolution over destruction. Communication intervention became a critical component of the rehabilitation process. The Zelneri discovered communication strategies that went far beyond their rigid, control-based approach. They learned about adaptive communication, emotional intelligence, and interspecies understanding. Most profound was the psychological transformation. Zelneri participants began to understand something revolutionary. That true strength wasn't about the capacity to control or destroy, but about the ability to protect, understand, and resolve conflicts with minimal additional harm. Some of the most senior captured military personnel began to question the fundamental assumptions of their civilization. The rehabilitation protocols had introduced something they had never experienced, a genuine approach to understanding that prioritized life and potential over destruction and control. Interstellar psychological research teams watched the intervention with intense interest. This wasn't simply a rehabilitation program. It was a comprehensive approach to psychological transformation that challenged everything understood about conflict, communication, and interspecies interaction. The facility became a beacon of hope for potential galactic understanding. Guardian unit specialists worked alongside psychological intervention teams, creating a comprehensive approach that went beyond traditional conflict resolution. As the rehabilitation process continued, something unprecedented began to emerge. The Zelneri participants were not just being detained or punished. They were being introduced to an entirely new way of understanding conflict, protection, and interspecies interaction. The psychological barriers were beginning to break down, and with them, the potential for a fundamentally new approach to galactic interaction was taking shape. The transformation had begun, and it was only the beginning. The Galactic Summit convened in the neutral space station orbiting the Andromeda Nexus, a marvel of interspecies engineering that represented the pinnacle of cooperative design. Representatives from over 60 different species gathered, their presence a testament to the profound transformation that had swept through galactic civilization. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before the assembled diplomatic corps, her presentation a culmination of years of research, intervention, and unprecedented communication strategies. The holographic displays behind her told a story that would reshape galactic understanding of conflict, protection, and interspecies interaction. The transformation had been more profound than anyone could have anticipated. The Guardian units had done more than resolve a single conflict. They had introduced a completely new approach to understanding that challenged fundamental assumptions about civilization, communication, and protection. Dr. Marcus Chen presented the comprehensive data of the Zelneri intervention. The holographic displays showed the intricate details of how a single approach had fundamentally altered the trajectory of potential galactic conflict. It wasn't a military victory in any traditional sense. It was a victory of understanding. The Kreltheri diplomatic delegation, once among the most oppressed species in the galactic community, now sat as key mediators. Their transformation mirrored the broader changes sweeping through interspecies relations. The Guardian units had demonstrated that protection wasn't about destruction, but about comprehensive understanding. Dr. Sandra Wei's communication research had become the foundation of a new diplomatic approach. The quantum uncertainty communication protocols developed by human researchers now formed the basis of interspecies negotiation. Communication was no longer about fixed messages, but about adaptive, living information systems that could respond to the most complex scenarios. The Zelneri delegation told a story of profound transformation. What had begun as a civilization built on aggressive expansion had become something entirely new. Their military and communication structures had been completely reimagined, built on principles of protection, understanding, and potential resolution. Psychological research facilities across multiple star systems had documented the unprecedented transformation. The rehabilitation approach pioneered by human specialists had become a model for conflict resolution. It wasn't about punishment or control, but about understanding the root causes of conflict and creating paths to resolution. The Guardian units had become something far more than a military solution. They were living embodiments of a new approach to interspecies interaction, systems of protection that prioritized life, understanding, and potential over destruction and control. Diplomatic simulation teams presented case studies that showed the profound impact of the new approach. Conflicts that would have previously escalated into full-scale wars were now being resolved through comprehensive communication and understanding. The Guardian units had introduced a new paradigm of protection that went far beyond traditional military thinking. The most profound transformation had occurred in the fundamental understanding of strength. Galactic civilizations were beginning to recognize that true power wasn't about the capacity to destroy, but about the ability to protect, understand, and resolve conflicts with minimal additional harm. Medical intervention had become a critical component of diplomatic strategy. The comprehensive approach developed by human researchers showed how medical knowledge could be a powerful tool for communication, understanding, and conflict resolution. Interstellar communication networks continued to process and share the evolving understanding. Each new analysis revealed layers of complexity that challenged previous assumptions about interspecies interaction, conflict resolution, and the nature of protection. The Zelneri representatives spoke last, their presentation a testament to the profound transformation. They described how a civilization built on aggressive expansion had discovered a new path, one of understanding, protection, and potential resolution. As the summit concluded, something unprecedented had emerged. A new approach to galactic interaction that prioritized life, understanding, and potential over destruction and control. The Guardian units had done more than resolve a conflict. They had introduced a completely new way of understanding interspecies interaction. The galactic community stood at the precipice of a new era. What had begun as a response to a single attack had transformed into a comprehensive approach to protection, communication, and understanding that would reshape civilization for generations to come. Humanity had introduced something revolutionary. Not a weapon of war, but a comprehensive system of understanding that could potentially transform how different species could interact, communicate, and resolve conflicts. The transformation was complete, and it was only the beginning.